Subscribe to the channel. Thanks. r/AskReddit. Redditors who were poor as kids. What things were normal to you when you were poor growing up? I got my first summer job when I was 12 or so, and anytime I managed to build up a nice chunk of change, my mom would borrow the money. She always paid it back, I think, but it wasn't an option. She just took it when needed. Not wearing shoes in the summer. You got shoes for school. They lasted until the end of the school year. Then you went barefoot. It's not as bad as it sounds, because we lived in the country. Also, your feet get calloused pretty fast. I grew up in Serbia in the 90s, very poor when hyperinflation hit, eating a bread and sugar sandwich, only being able to afford milk for my little brother, 1 glass per day. My dad giving me enough money so I could go to the store to buy a single banana. Bread loaf literally costing 2 cents. Wearing the same clothes for a week straight. Taking a shower once a week and having to boil your water in a large pot. Sharing a school bag with my sister. Our house had nylon and duct tape where some windows were supposed to be. This especially sucked during storms. Planting and harvesting our own vegetables. Sealing some house cracks with mud. Walking everywhere and asking for rides because we didn't own a car. Firewood, and only one room of the house having heat. Coca-Cola was a luxury. If I saw someone drinking Coke, I thought they were rich. I'll add more when I remember more. Being poor sucked, and so did the Yugoslavian civil wars. In relation to the hyperinflation, my dad always says you get your paycheck, and by the time you arrived home it was worth half. The first time I remember consciously realizing that we were poor was when I was 6 and went to the doctor because an eye infection had turned into sepsis. When asked who our family doctor was, and I had to reply the emergency room. The reason the question was asked was because the PA at the ER a week earlier had misdiagnosed it as pinky and sent us home saying everything would get better in a week or so. Actually, I had an infected cut on my cornea and it was spreading into my eye socket and bloodstream. The doctor was incredulous that nobody had even actually looked at the eye yet, as within half a second of using that eye light scope thingy doctors use to look in eyes and ears showed him what was wrong. I mean, I knew we didn't have much money a good while before that, but that was the first time I realized just how crippling poverty really is. That because my parents didn't have enough green paper slips in a bank, that I might lose my eye, and that the lack of those little green slips was going to have a long-term negative impact on my future. Still being very hungry after lunchtime in school. I remember having some pretzels and a small sandwich, while the other kids had Lunchables and cookies and all that junk. I also was recently reminiscing with a childhood friend of mine, and I mentioned how I miss my old house, and she said I don't. Your house was kinda dumpy. I took that like a dagger. Powdered milk. Noack. My parents sometimes skipped meals so us kids could eat. Clothes were hand-me-downs or from Walmart, and only for school starting. No wastefulness. Rarely eat out. No name brands. Antenna TV. No cable. No healthcare/health insurance. No dentist visits. I started working and buying my own clothes at age 14. Our home was falling apart around us. My dad tried to keep it together, sort of. Oh, and my parents never being home, because they each worked multiple jobs. I could go on. Blocking off whole sections of the house in winter to save money by heating only 1 or 2 rooms. Heating water on the stove so you could bathe with hot water. Buying marked down meat that was graying or slightly green in spots. Burnt scars on the back of my legs for trying to stand too close to the kerosene heater in the winter. Paper food stamps. My mom sending me to the neighbors' houses to ask to borrow things like dish soap. We were homeless for 6 months. Luckily we had a camper to stay in at a campground, but we made do. There was a basketball court, a pond, and a loft of rich kids. Kinda made me feel like shit when these kids had like a second home that they go to a month out of the year. And I'm in a camper with my cokehead mom, alcoholic stepdad, and brother that's now on the run with 3 warrants. I guess I'm the only one that's somewhat normal, lol. We never really had food either. Afterwards we moved into low-income housing and would lose power all the time cause they'd rather get fucked up than pay bills. I came home from school to see my TV, my PS2, games, gone. They pawned them to pay rent. I was working street the time, and I had to pay to get it back. I fucking hated it. I had a girlfriend and would always go to her house. Basically came home to sleep and that's it. I'd try to stay out of the house as much as possible and was super embarrassed when I'd have to tell her that I had no power or food in the fridge or a phone. But now, I work my ass off, my wife as well, and we get shit done. We're not rich, but we're comfortable, and we have the things we want. And are thankful for every bit, if it because she came up the same way. A single kerosene heater that would stink/smoke the whole house out on the few nights a year we could afford to run it. Sleeping on the bathroom floor in summer because it was too dangerous to sleep on the balcony. Bologna and tomato sauce sandwiches 3 times a day. 1 pair of hand-me-down shoes that I was never allowed wear unless it was a special occasion. The only item in our house that used electricity was the clock radio in my parents' bedroom, and it only got turned on when they went to bed. Christmas consisted of receiving the clothes and school supplies for the next year. All your friends at school aren't hungry and share their lunch with you, and you never work out why. You discover chocolate milk and it literally blows your mind. McDonald's comes to town and 3 years later a friend's dad is driving a bunch of kids home from the game and asks you what you want, and you say nothing. Thanks, because you know better than to ask for anything, and because you have literally no idea what they actually sell there. Entire weekends spent wandering around town looking for coins so that you can get 50c worth of mixed lollies. Regular visits from the government lady who asks you a bunch of weird questions. Mum crying all the time. You get $10 from somewhere and it never even occurs to you to spend it. You give it to your parents. You never ever want for anything because there is no point. Really bad home haircuts. I didn't have my hair cut at an actual place until I became an adult. Turning down a side road when a police car was nearby because our tags were out. Watching other kids getting to go on all the field trips and not getting to go watch the talent shows and plays at school that cost $1 to get into. I sat in that empty classroom a lot, having to announce every morning in roll call that I'd take the free lunch tray that day, thanks. Never having snacks at snack time, wearing donated clothes, and having another kid announce that the shirt I was wearing used to be hers. A kid dropped a dime on the floor of the cafeteria and made me pick it up because I needed it and she didn't. Just constantly bullying about my clothes and house. The police would come into our neighborhood, fill up the block with their cars, open their trunks full of toys, and give them out to all the kids. Realized after we moved that I stopped seeing this phenomenon, and I asked my mom why they didn't do it in our new neighborhood. Just straight up, oh yeah, it was a sort of charity thing, because we were poor and our neighbors were poor. Everyone there was just poor. Knowing what we would have for lunches and dinners 100% of the time, because it was always the same. Being extra careful with consumables, because if you were wasteful your parents would get really angry, or worse, just start crying. Going to visit grandparents and all their church friends would overload us with toys and clothes, all of which were old, outdated, and smelled funny, but we took home anyways. Old mildewed towels. When I finally came into more money, it was such a foreign concept to actually replace towels more than once every 6 to 8 years. Same with bedding. It had never even crossed my mind that if your pillow starts getting gross you should replace it instead of just dealing with it. Watered down hand soap, shampoo, conditioner, glass cleaner, etc. Lots of dinners involving ingredients like ramen noodle packages. We had a very bland stir fry that just used a pound of ground beef, a pack of ramen, and frozen stir fry veggies with some seasonings. It was enough for the 4 of us. Campbell soup was awesome. Most people hate how salty it is, but I grew up on that shit and still love it. Using things long after they had worn out. The thing that sticks out most to me is hairbrushes. They could be missing half the bristles, but it didn't cross anyone's mind to replace it because it still barely performed its intended function. Toys were also used long after they wore out or broke. I suspect my siblings and I were also especially hard on toys. We were smart kids and often found creative and unconventional uses for toys when playing, but it was probably also because a lot of our toys came from thrift stores. The only reason we had a computer was because my mom's father gave us his old one free of charge. We were part of some technology test group and actually got to be early adopters of the internet and got web service in 1996. Without that test group though, IDK how long it would have been. We were watching and buying VHS tapes long after DVD became a thing. I think the last VHS we bought brand new was Madagascar, 2005. We had to really like a movie before my parents would buy it. We mostly just checked them out from the library, which meant not getting to watch new releases. Wearing clothes long after we had outgrown them was kinda standard for a few years when we didn't have the luxury of hand-me-downs from my older cousins. One day my mom was yelling about something money related and told me and my siblings that we were always dressed like little refugee children. I'm not sure if she was mad at us or the situation. I dress really nice, usually overdressed these days, and it is because of moments/comments like that. Not taking very long road trips at all because we didn't know if the car would break down or not. Or 3-hour trip was a huge deal. No video games or cable TV. I have gotten flack for this one from other people in similar situations saying they were dirt poor and still had cable. My parents just didn't see a need to spend money on cable when they were tight on money. It was PBS all day every day for us if we wanted TV. My kindergarten friends had Pokemon Red and Blue on their Game Boys. I was very sad that I couldn't have Pokemon. Christmas was a huge deal. My parents worked amazingly hard to get us cool stuff for Christmas, so it was kinda that one day we got a taste of more luxurious situation. On my second or third Christmas I got a shitton of Fisher-Price Little People playsets. Nowadays I'm making very good money in a comfortable job and I have all the tech and clothing I could want. I collect old video games as a sort of way to make up for lost time. My first ever video game was a cocktail table Space Raiders game at some arcade thing when my grandparents hosted a family reunion at a dude ranch. I was 5 and totally fell in love with the entire concept of video games. My parents felt bad about having to tell me I couldn't have a Gamma Boy or SNES/N64. It means so much that I now have the luxury of playing all the games I didn't get to enjoy as a kid. It makes me so happy in a way I can't really describe that I can finally make this dream come true for myself. Anyway, I sorta started rambling, but it's really cool to see how far I've come. Free lunch. I thought it was so cool that I didn't have to pay for lunch until I realized what it meant. When we were finally unable to qualify for free lunch, I still couldn't pay for lunch. My friends thought I was anorexic, but I was just too embarrassed to say that my mom couldn't give me money for lunch. Never being able to buy anything from book fairs. Having a tiny homemade lunch, a sandwich and an orange or something, or no lunch at all on field trips, while the other kids got to buy food. Not eating out, except for birthdays. Fast food and takeout wasn't really a thing in my life until I moved out and had my own income. Everything was homemade. Pizza delivery was a big deal. Never buying name brand foods. You learn what off-brands taste the exact same and buy those when you're lucky enough to pick out some snacks, but literally all food was, and household products for that matter were off-brand. Finding ways to save money, whether it be buy coupons or buying school clothes from eBay and second-hand stores. Grew up in a tourist town and both parents worked for attractions. We got to do a lot of cool stuff, only because my parents would save the employee tickets they would get in paychecks and trade with other attractions and sites and stuff. I'm an adult now, and it's still hard for me to spend money on things I don't find absolutely necessary, even though I have the money to buy things I want. It's taught me to prioritize money and be grateful, and take good care of what I have. Dish soap being used for everything. Laundry, bath, dishes, floor cleaner, whatever. I guess a little bit went a long way IDK, but I hated it. Why buy facial soap and moisturizer when there is perfectly good dish soap? My skin still sucks I think from not getting properly cared for growing up. Wiping with fast food napkins because there was no toilet paper. Going to the nurse at school every day during my period to ask for a tampon or pad. This was hell for me for years until I could get a job. When my mom wouldn't buy me clothes or shoes for middle school, I had to duct tape my shoes. I rocked it like a fashion piece, but really I couldn't get my shoes to stay together. Pretty normal poor kid stuff. I will say that as an adult I have never once ran out of toilet paper or laundry face soap. I usually keep a backup compulsively of all soaps and I have a large bin of tampons. Been trying out a Diva cup too. I have zero gold jewelry, but I'm set for the next few years worth of periods. Using the neighbor's hose when they weren't home to fill buckets to flush the toilet. Our power usually stayed on. My mom worried the neighbors would call CPS if the lights were off, so they let other utilities go first. Like others here, no /heat or much food. Every winter I hoped for snow so my dad could make snow cream. Fresh snow, sugar, and milk. Such a treat as a kid. When I was a kid, I was bought a high-end name brand layer of jeans for Christmas by rich relatives. Everyone at school was jealous. I didn't even know the brand, because we never had brand name anything. Jeans were just whatever fit that I could find at the thrift store. I was an only child till I was 11, so I didn't have anyone to get hand-me-downs from. It was about 2008 when me and my brothers moved in with my mom. She managed to get a tiny apartment for all 4 of us. Tiny kitchen, small bathrooms. We were grateful that we had our own place. The apartment didn't have cable, or at least we didn't, so when my brothers and I had to get up for school, my mom would plug in an old radio and turn it to the Donnie Simpson show at 7 AM in the morning. It gave us our daily news and weather updates, music and everything we needed to know, just like a regular news station on TV would. Cut to 2010, and my mom finally got a better job, so she was able to pay for cable. We had gotten so used to the radio that, even though we had the ability to watch the news, we still wanted to hear the radio. Sharing a room and bathroom with my dad and sister, we spent a little over a year in this arrangement. Had just a little 14-inch TV, bunk beds on the side of the room and a queen bed in the middle with one big dresser and a couple tubs we used for clothes. I really thought it was fun all the time I got to spend around my dad. Wasn't necessarily poor my entire childhood, but looking back I know this was taxing for a father to take on by himself. Now he's living it up. 15/10 good dad. Anyone have to share a room with siblings and or parents? Subscribe. Thanks for watching UpGoat Reddit. Try like and subscribe button if it still works.